Here is mothers, welcome. Ladies, welcome. I hope you know how much we love you and how much we appreciate you and value you. I've been married for 23 years to the same woman, which is good, right? Anyway, and here's one of the things I quickly discovered about my wife. I knew it from when I first met her, but over time it became more obvious to me, and that is this: she is a romantic. She loves poetry, and she loves love stories, and she loves classic movies, and she loves like music that has violins and cellos in it, that kind of stuff, right? I mean, she loves all of that kind of stuff. Now, unfortunately for her, she married this, all right? And this tries, but this isn't into that. Poetry is, roses are like that, right? That's what poetry is to me, and I try and I do my best, but over the years she has helped inform me of what I would call let's call it this: timeless love stories, right? Romeo and Juliet, Rhett Butler and Scarlett O'Hara and Gone with the Wind, Noah and Allie in The Notebook, Elizabeth Bennet and Mr. Darcy in Pride and Prejudice, and I've seen every version of that movie that there is, and there's like 15. Why do you need 15 versions of the same book? I don't know, but they have them. And I have enjoyed all of those movies with my wife over the last 23 years of marriage and year and a half of dating. That's just who we are. And in fact, if you even look through the Bible, you'll find that the Bible is full of love stories, right? Some of them really classic and beautiful. Some of them a little messed up and broken. But stories like Jacob and Rachel, who spent 14 years working just for the right to marry her, and then had to marry her sister first, and they're all kind of crazy with that. And stories like Ruth and Boaz, where Ruth thought that, man, this was the end for her. Her life was over. Literally, like physically. She didn't know how she was even going to survive. And God allowed her to meet Boaz and create this beautiful life. Even the broken ones like David and Bathsheba, and even the ones that sometimes get lost in the midst of a greater story like Joseph and Mary. Well, today we're going to start a new series, and this series is called Stories They Don't Teach in Sunday School. If you've got your 4G guide, we're going to be on page 4 today, if you want to take notes and follow along with us. And these are stories that for someone like me who grew up going to church almost every single week, grew up in Sunday school all the time, and heard like all the stories. Like by the time I was 10, 11 years old, I thought I knew and had heard all of the stories. And then I got a little bit older and I started reading the Bible for myself, and I discovered some things. I discovered there were stories that we sometimes skip over, and stories that we sometimes leave like details out of because they make us uncomfortable, because they're not always clean and nice and pretty, and because sometimes they deal with really difficult topics and difficult situations. And that's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to look at some stories that maybe aren't the most well-known stories. Some of them are going to be more well-known than others, and stories that maybe sometimes you didn't know all the details about because well, someone wasn't crazy enough like I am to talk about it. But these are stories that God put in the Bible for a reason. And there's stories that the more that we understand them, the more that we know them, we understand the messiness of life and the greatness of God in the midst of that. And so we're going to start with a love story. Now, I'm not going to say it's a love story that's an example for us to follow. In fact, man, I'm going to warn you, there's probably some things you should not do in this love story, but nevertheless, it's a love story that teaches a lot about what God's plan for family and for marriage and for relationships are. And it's the story of Abram and Sarai. And some of you may know Abram and Sarai is Abraham and Sarah. God changes their names later. They were the couple that had a baby when they were in their 80s. So, that's all kind of craziness, right? Imagine that, changing diaper when you're 80. You both got diapers at the same time. That's a different thing, right? And you got all of this, and that's what some of you, he's the father of the Hebrew people. And one day when Abram is a young man, or not a young man, he's actually a fully grown man, God shows up to him and says, Abram, guess what? Of all the people alive, I have chosen you to be the father of my people. Your descendants are going to be my people, and they're going to outnumber the stars in the sky. Your descendants are going to be people, if they bless them, then they're going to be blessed. And if they curse them, whoever curses them is going to be cursed. And through your descendants, all the nations are going to be blessed. Talking about Jesus, the Messiah that was still 2,000 years before he came. And he's saying to him, hey, guess what? I have chosen you. Now here's what I need you to do, Abram. I need you to pack up your stuff, load up your family, and travel from the land that you've grown up in, travel from your mother and father, and I'm going to take you to a new land, and I'll tell you when you get there. So let me translate what God said. Get your stuff and go that way. And when I tell you to stop, stop, but keep going that way. And so imagine Abram's going like, okay, God shows up. And I'm telling you, most of us, if God showed up physically to us like he did with Abram, most of us would go, okay, God, I'll do what you want. And Abram does that. But Abram's got to do something. He's got to go home. And he's got to say, hey, honey, guess what? What? We're moving. Okay, where are we moving to? I don't know. Well, how long is it going to take us to get there? I don't know. Well, where are we going to live when we get there? I don't know. What language do the people speak? I don't know. Were you out in the sun too long, Abe? I mean, does it maybe get a little heat stroke going on there? Because the question would be, well, why are we moving? And what did he have to say? Oh, yeah, God told me. Now, ladies, how many of you might say, could God show up and tell me to? Right? Because this is a big deal, right? But nevertheless, in the midst of all of this, in the midst of everything that's happening, God says, Abram and Sarai load up their stuff, and they begin this, what would take, most people think, between 6 and 8 months. And they travel from the land of Ur, where he grew up, to what would become modern-day Israel, the nation of Israel. He makes that journey with his family and his stuff the whole time, not knowing how long it's going to take, not knowing what it's going to be like when they get there, not knowing what to expect. And then they finally arrive in this promised land, in this land that God says is going to be your land. And you would think that everything would be great, but then something happens, and that's where I want to pick up the story in Genesis chapter 12, verse 10. They've just arrived in the land. They're just getting settled, and then it says, now there was a famine in the land. So Abram went down to Egypt to sojourn there, for the famine was severe in the land. Now that's one verse that has so much in it, because the promised land suddenly isn't so promising, is it? I mean, the minute they get there, it's like the rain stops and the Great Depression kicks in, and people are fighting for food and trying to survive because there's a famine in the land. And there's no water, there's no food, there's no jobs, there's nothing to do. And so Abram packs up his family again. Can you imagine, right? Like Sarai going, why did we leave our home for this? Why did we leave everything that we knew for this? She never says that, but you know somewhere in her head that has to be going on. And so Abram, it says they went down, they sojourned. Sojourn does not mean just taking a vacation, right? They begin to travel from place to place, looking for food, looking for water, looking for work, looking for a way to provide for their family, because there was no way they were going to survive if they stayed in this land that God had promised them. And remember, this is in the time when, before there was this thing called Google, where you could just say, hey, where's their food? Right? And they couldn't just Google, how do you survive in a family? They couldn't just Google, hey, where are the best places to get a job, or the best places to find water, the best places. No, they had to just listen to rumors. Someone walks by and goes, yeah, I heard there's food and water down in Egypt. Let's head that way. They had to just to stop for a moment and maybe just pray and say, God, okay, we don't know how to do it. Can you just point us in the right direction? They had to hope that somehow they could survive another day to travel, maybe one day closer to food, and not knowing if they're even going in the right direction. There aren't road maps for them. They're just general way of saying, hey, here's where you can go and here's what you need to do. And so they had to just do their best to survive. And what started out as you're going to be the father of a great nation is now them not even sure if they're going to make it through the next day. Look at the next verse in verse 11 with me, and it says, "And when he was about to enter Egypt," that's where the story gets good, "he said to Sarai, his wife, 'I know that you are a woman beautiful in appearance.'" That's a really good start, men. Okay, just doesn't end well, but it starts well, right? You are a woman and beautiful, and when they, did I get that? I'm sorry. Beautiful in appearance, and when the Egyptians see you, they will say, 'This is his wife.' Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say that you are my sister, that it may go well with me because of you, and that my life may be spared for your sake." So apparently Sarai was gorgeous. Like not just cute, but beautiful. I mean, and here's the thing is that she's 65 years old, and she is so beautiful that Abram goes, "Man, when we get down there, they're going to see how beautiful you are, and they're going to kill me so that they can take you as their wife." Now, let me just say that I know it's not easy to live with that kind of beauty. Right? It's not easy when you just want people to look at you for yourself, or if they want something from you, and y'all can laugh at it. It's okay. I understand who I am. This is why I have a beard. I got to cover up all this beauty. But imagine her and her husband coming to her and saying, "Hey, I'm worried. You're so beautiful. I'm worried they're going to kill me." And women, what do you want your man to do in that situation? "I'm worried, but God's bigger, and I'm going to protect you. I'm worried, but I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'll give my life up for you, whatever it takes." But he comes up with this plan, and I have no idea how he comes up with it. There have been a lot of hold my beer and watch this kind of plans, but this is one of the worst I have ever seen, right? "Tell everyone that you're my sister." Now, let me just tell you the crazy part of it. He's like halfway right. Because technically, Abram and Sarai are half brother and sister, and that's a whole nother level of like weirdness, and I don't have time to go into all of that. Let me just say that I'm thankful we don't do that anymore, okay? And don't come up to me and tell me you want to marry your half-sister, and will I do the wedding? Because the answer is no. We just don't need to do that anymore. But in that time, it was accepted. But Abram is not saying this. Listen, he's not saying this because he's going, we just got to always tell the truth wherever we go. He's not saying this because he's a man of honor. He's not saying that tell everyone that you're my sister because, he wants to do the right thing. No, he's saying that because he's scared for his life. He's saying that because he's worried, what are they going to do to me? He's saying that because he's living in fear. Can I just say that fear makes you do some crazy things, doesn't it? The other night, in the middle of the night, my youngest child was screaming at the top of her lungs like an axe murderer was breaking in, and I go running in, kitchen knife and everything, like I'm ready to fight, and I go, "What is going on?" And she's on top of her bed bouncing around because there's a water roach on the ground, and I'm like, "Have you lost your mind?" Because fear makes you do some crazy stuff. We found a snake skin in our yard about that big, right? It was about that big. Now if you talk to the kids, it was like that big, but it was about that big. And I showed it to my wife and the kids, and they say, "We got to sell the house." And I'm like, "What? We don't have to sell the house. There's a snake that big under our house. We got to get rid of it." Fear makes you, no, we're not selling our house, don't worry. But fear makes you do some crazy stuff. And Abram has given into his fear, and he says, "Let's just do this. Let's just tell everyone you're my sister. They won't kill me." But what's the implication here? What's he saying? What are they going to do instead? They'll go marry you, but they won't kill me. You'll have to go live with another man and another family at another place, but I'll be okay. And so he says, "Let's do this." And I love how he throws it in, that my life may be spared for your sake. I don't know if he's telling the truth right here. Let's keep reading. Verse 14. It says, "When Abram entered Egypt, the Egyptians saw that the woman was very beautiful. And when the princes of Pharaoh saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh. And the woman was taken into Pharaoh's house. And for her sake he dealt well with Abram. And he had sheep, oxen, male donkeys, male servants, female donkeys, and camels. So what ends up happening is that they arrive in town and everyone is talking about the most beautiful woman that they'd ever seen. How amazing she is, and the word gets back to Pharaoh and says that Pharaoh takes her into. Now listen, this is not Pharaoh falls in love with her and Pharaoh sits down and they have coffee and they talk about life and he's just intrigued with how intelligent she is and her beauty and everything. No, this is Pharaoh collecting her like he did with probably every other beautiful woman that he saw and every other beautiful woman that he wanted. And he calls her and says, know what? She's going to be mine. She's going to be part of one of my many wives. And Abram gets animals and servants. His wife, Sarai, gets shipped off to live with a bunch of other women at the Pharaoh's pleasure. And he ends up becoming wealthy. He ends up getting everything that makes a person wealthy in that time. Happy Mother's Day, ladies, right? Let's sell our wives for male donkeys and oxen and servants and camels and everything else. Don't worry, it doesn't end here, right? Let's look in verse 17 with me. And it says this, but the Lord afflicted Pharaoh and his house with great plagues because of Sarai, Abram's not sister, Abram's wife. So Pharaoh called Abram and says, what is this that you have done to me? Why did you not tell me that she was your wife? Why did you say she is my sister so that I took her for my wife? Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. And Pharaoh gave men orders concerning him, and they sent him away with his wife and all that he had. I think what happens here is God says, enough is enough, Abram. Enough is enough, Abram. And soon plague begins to break out in Pharaoh's house. And it's almost like Oprah, where she's passing out cars, but God's passing out plagues. You get a plague, and you get a plague, and you get a plague. And pretty soon, everyone in Pharaoh's house has the plague. Pretty soon, except for, and here's how I think, I hope I'm not reading more into here, but you wonder, how does Pharaoh figure out that Sarai is the cause of it? I think what ends up happening is that she's the only one who doesn't have the plague. And he looks around and goes, wait, she doesn't. He begins to ask questions. He finds out what's really going on. And he says, and he brings Abram in. He goes, what have you done to me? What are you doing? How in the world why would you let me marry your wife and take my animals and take my servants and take everything that I gave you? Why in the world would you do that? Why would you do that to me? Why would you do that to the other people? Why would you do that to your wife? And he says, you know what? Take your wife, you and your wife, get out of here. Get out of here and all that you have. Take your stuff and leave and go away. Can we just say that and this is where we're going to end the story, because they go and live happily ever after, right? It's a little bit more complicated than that, but they do keep going. And here's the thing. Can we just say that there is much that is messed up about this story? Like, we look at this story and we're going like I thought this was Father Abraham, who had many sons, and many sons had Father Abraham, and I'm one of them, and so are you. So let's just praise the Lord. And you're going, dude, Abram was a jerk. Right? First of all, you don't have the courage to stand up and take care of your wife. And secondly, you basically trade her in for some animals and from some servants. And then, you know what's even worse? He does the whole thing again later on, a couple years later. And you know what even gets even worse than that? He has his son. His son ends up doing the exact same thing and causing so much pain for their families and so much pain to other people. And you're looking at it going, what in the world are you thinking? So I'm going to tell you today, and it's Mother's Day, and this is not how to be good husbands, right? But I do want to spend a few today, on this day, that we honor women, that we honor mothers, that we honor those who have given so much. I want to spend a few moments talking to you men, because I think that what we see in the story of Abram and Sarai it teaches us so much about what God wants for us as men, and it teaches us maybe what is the absolute best Mother's Day gift. Now, don't hear what I'm saying for your wife or for your mom, because you do. And if you come back and say you didn't because of what I preached today, I'm going to call you a heretic because you're just misunderstanding what I'm saying. Buy them a gift. Look, you know you've been happily married 23 years, and all your wife wants for Mother's Day is a battery-powered leaf blower, and you get her the most powerful battery-powered leaf blower on the market, and you walk in on the morning of Mother's Day and you wake your son up by blowing that thing, and he's like, what in the world? That is happiness, okay? So buy your wife a gift, men. That's not what I'm not saying that, but I also want to challenge you. I want to challenge you to consider two questions, and I want to challenge you that if you have the courage today to maybe at the end of the day, when everything's sort of calmed down and you've done, and you got a few moments before you go to bed, to ask two questions. I'm convinced if Abram had asked these two questions to his wife, it would have saved him and it would have saved generations some pain. It would have made his whole marriage and his relationship with his wife so much better if he had just asked these two questions. Number one is, how can I better provide for you? What was Abram's concern this whole time? Himself. My safety. My possessions. My convenience. My needs. And the entire time that this story is taking place, his entire focus was on himself. What if he had switched it and said, hey, rather than Sarai, here's what I need you to do for me. What if he had said, how can I provide for you? What do you need from me? You know, our world has lost sight of the fact that men, we are first and foremost called to serve and to provide for our family. Paul puts it this way in Ephesians. He says, husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave himself up for her. What does he say? What is the standard that we are held to? What is the comparison that we are supposed to say? If I want to know how I'm supposed to love my wife, I'm supposed to love my wife the way that Christ, the way that Jesus loved the church. And how did Jesus love the church? He was willing to die for you. He was willing to die for me to meet our greatest needs. And not because he got anything in return, not because we can do anything for him, not because we have anything to offer him, but because he chooses to love us. And I think that many men in our day and age, in the world, and even in the church, have lost their passion to provide financially. Some of us men need to get off our backsides and get to work. I'm not saying that women can't work, because my wife works and I'm thankful for it. That's how we have great health insurance. So I'm not saying that, but I'm saying at the end of the day, you know where it falls on? It falls on me to provide. It means to provide emotionally. It means to provide physically. And it means to provide spiritually for our families. I have a friend who's an evangelist. He works for the North American Mission Board, and he put on his Instagram feed this week. He says there's a 0.02% chance of your child becoming a professional athlete, but there's a 100% chance that one day they're going to stand before Jesus. And how many of us, even us fathers, will teach our kids to be athletes or musicians, or will work hard to provide a nice house and nice stuff, and neglect the most important provision that we need to give our family, which is spiritual. That means that we need to have a vibrant relationship with God. That means that our kids need to see not perfection in us, but someone who is struggling to be the man that God's called us to be. That means the greatest love that we can give our wives is to love our God more than anything else and love them second. It means that we are serving together and we're working together. It means that the most important decisions are spiritual decisions. It means that we realize that we get to represent God to our families. And so, men, have you considered, have you thought, have you asked your family and your wife? And it's a scary question to ask. How can I better provide for you? And in all areas, but most importantly, how can I be the spiritual provider in my family for my wife and for my kids and for all those who come in contact with me? How can I provide? How can I better provide for you? But there's a second question, and that's this that I wish Abram had asked, which is, how can I better protect you? Not because you're weak, but because you're beautiful. You know, if you look at this story, you know who the strongest person in this story is? You know what's powerful to me, the hero of this story is? It's not Pharaoh. It's definitely not Abram. It's Sarai. And you want to talk about an example of strength and courage? I mean, not only was she obviously physically beautiful, but she was pretty amazing because she was faithful and she had courage and she did what was right when everyone around her was doing what was wrong. I mean, this is an amazing woman. This is an example, and I'm thankful that my daughters grow up in a world where they have options that she did not have. But in the midst of all of the brokenness around her, she is an example of power and strength and beauty. But what if Abram had said, you know what, I'm going to protect you not because you're weak, but because I value you. You protect what you value, don't you? I mean, some of you, if I broke into on your property and tried to take your stuff, you would shoot me and not even think twice about it, wouldn't you? And everybody going, amen. Or, okay, calm down. I'm not going to break in your house, so don't shoot me, all right? But we would protect our property, and some of us would protect our stuff and our career and our reputation and our power. But will we protect all of that and ignore our family? Ignore the protection that God has called us to say we're going to do whatever it takes to make sure our family is who God wants it to be. And guys, this includes physical protection. I mean, I can't say how important I think that is, but I think it's also protecting the purity of our marriage. Man, you realize we're responsible for protecting the purity of the marriage. That means it matters what you look at. Can I say that? It matters what you look at on your phone or on your computer or on a calendar or on whatever, because what you look at tells your entire family what you value and what's beautiful to you. It matters what you look at. It matters the relationships that you have with other people, and there should never be another person that takes a place or takes priority or gives you something that your spouse is supposed to give you. That means it's careful the relationships that there's no such thing as innocent flirting. And there's no such thing as having, well, that's just my friend and they're important to me. No, they can be important to you, but they're never more important than your family. Why? Because we fight for and protect the purity of our marriage, and anything that's going to come in and pervert it or destroy it or hurt it, we get rid of it because we're protectors. It also means that we protect the future relationship. Emily and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel with our children. And I don't know when they leave, but most of the time it's like, oh no, the kids are going to leave one day. But Emily and I are at that place where we can see that, and it's caused us to go, are we good? And by the way, we're good, so this isn't like I'm saying no problem, but it's caused us to go, how are we going to be when our kids are gone? Because guess what? It's like yesterday I was bringing that 6'2" lanky boy home, but he was like that big. Right? too often, men, we don't take responsibility for protecting the future of our marriage, of dating and laughing together and having hobbies together and spending time together and enjoying life together beyond just raising the kids and working and getting by with life. And maybe some of us men need to say, how can I better protect you and the longevity of our marriage? What am I doing to make sure that we're in love in 40 years, just like we were at year 4 or day 4 or whatever it is? So this Mother's Day, the day that we honor and remember and thank the women in our lives, men, I want to throw it down to you. And I want to challenge you that the best gift you can give, and ladies, if I'm wrong, you get to come up afterwards and tell me. Don't tell me now because it'd be embarrassing. But if I'm wrong, you get to come up afterwards and tell me I'm wrong. But I don't think many women are going to tell me I'm wrong. That the best gift that you men can give to the women in your life is to provide and to protect. Physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The most important. So what can we do this Mother's Day, men, to provide and protect? Women, if your husband is doing this, even if it's imperfect, can I just, not today, okay, because it's your day and you don't have to do it today, but maybe tomorrow tell him thank you. Because I'm here to tell you that this is not easy and our world does not make this easy. It doesn't make it easy for us. It's almost like you do this and the world looks at you and goes, oh, you're toxic, and oh, you're bad, and oh, you're mean, and oh, you're controlling. And really all you're trying to do is to, women, if you've got a husband who does this, maybe just every now and then tell him thank you. And you probably do. And men, if you're at the place where you're wondering if it makes any difference, keep going. Because we're not doing it for a certain response. We're not doing it for any other reason than the fact that God has called us to do this. And single men, start learning how to be a provider and protector before you start thinking about getting married. And single women, don't settle for anything less than a provider and a protector. Because I'm going to tell you, you want a better love story than Abram and Sarai? It begins with a man who is willing to say, how can I provide and how can I protect? Not going to be perfect at it, but how can I do it? And may I grow and become better at it tomorrow than I am today.